If you've ever felt like you're living a life that wasn't quite yours or carrying burdens you didn't choose, then you're in the right place. I'm Barbie Wolf, and this is Unboxing Barbie, the podcast for cycle breakers and comrades with our boots on the ground. It's a space for honest conversations about healing, faith, and becoming who we were always meant to be. Let's unpack some things together. Hey everyone, and welcome to the show. Today we're doing something a little different, a little raw. For a while now, I've been on a journey of rediscovering and really wrestling with my faith. And I believe that the best way to truly understand what you believe is to open it up to the hard questions. So today, I've invited someone I love and trust deeply to help me do just that. She is a cherished friend, a brilliant family medicine doctor from Minnesota, and a person whose perspective I value immensely. Her name is Jeni, and she's an atheist. I've asked her here today, not for a debate, not to try and win an argument, but for a genuine conversation, to create space where she can ask anything, and I can do my best to answer from the heart. This is about friendship, it's about courage, and it's about what it looks like to love someone even when you see the world in fundamentally different ways. So with a deep breath and a very open heart, Jeni, thank you so much for being here. Where would you like to begin?
Hi, Barbie. I'm so stoked to do this. As you know, I have wanted to have a conversation with you about God and religion and divinity in general for years at this point. So I'm actually really excited that the very first time we get to openly discuss this, it's in a very public setting.
Yes.
So I kind of figured I would start chronologically because you were raised in the faith, is my understanding.
Yeah, it's tricky. My mother had a really complicated personality type, and she had a pretty wild experience with God in her young adult years. And so that carried into a lot of my very young childhood years. We were a part of a faith community here in Simi Valley that I actually wish I could get reconnected with. So I will maybe do a shout out at the end. I'm just so dying to know some of the people that I was supported by back in the day because I was baptized when I was 7. And I made that choice myself. And I still have that Bible. I was always really deeply attuned to the spirit. I think part of that, though, is my synesthesia because I do experience the world in colors and sensations and smells and different things. I can taste smells. And so that I feel like made everything feel alive. And I often sensed things around me that others didn't. So God always felt close to me. It was almost tangible for me. Um, like a presence just kind of woven into the fabric of my everyday life as childhood. But I was also like in this really traumatic family setting. And so there was a lot of disconnect there for me emotionally between the person who was at church and the person who was at home. So then when I was a young adult, everything changed. I went through even more trauma, a really crazy divorce. And I watched, this is probably where I'll cry because it brings in Lori, who looks a lot like your little boy, looked a lot like Cade. So and as an empath and someone who can sense things under the surface, like her suffering was brutal for me to
It
watch.
seems like it was almost
Like on a,
tangible for you, like you could feel what she could feel.
absolutely. So, I watched her get worse and worse. And
Can you share a little bit about Lori's situation just for context?
yeah, so she um, was presented like a completely neurotypical child at birth. Met all of the regular milestones of early infancy, um, but around 18 months got meningitis, lost her hearing, and then a cascade of events happened. And well, by the time
Take your time. a meaningful story
Ugh,
for me
it
as well because,
it is. I
I
know.
have a medically complex child, and there's a different way that you love a child with such significant needs. And you loved
Yes.
Lori not just as a sibling, but also in some caretaking roles that we've talked about before.
Yeah. And so by the time Lori was about, I don't know, Lori was wheelchair bound by her teenage years and then just continued to decline, from there. She used to be able to sign. We could communicate that way. Oh, gosh.
Take your time. How old are you in
There's so much.
relation to Lori? So we have some record.
She was born in September of 67. I was born in March of 69. So she's my older sissy that I played with. She played with me like a doll. We have these really fun pictures of her, as the older sibling. Anyway, that's a different topic. But it's connected because I'm believing and reading about a God who heals, and I'm watching him choose to not heal her. So I got pretty angry. I went through, I don't know, years of just hating. If I don't think I ever went to the place where I didn't believe that he existed. I just always went to the place of how freaking dare you? Like, why not her? That kind of stuff. So I got pretty mad at God for a while. And so I don't think I've ever lived without the thought of him here. I've just gone through periods where I'm like, screw you. I don't want anything to do with you.
So it sounds to me as though the faith has always remained strong. It's been in different conceptualizations of divinity.
Right.
And sometimes it hasn't even been a very pleasant thing that's been in your life, but it's always been a component of who you are. You've always felt very connected to the concept of God.
Right. But, like, then experiencing that is what helped me wrestle, like, experiencing um, both poles of this relationship of me feeling like I'm mad at him and I don't want anything to do with him, and I love him, like, with my whole heart. Um, those collided. Actually, it was the battered women's shelter when I had a moment where he made himself absolutely tangibly, physically present for me, like, shook my whole world, and that was like, "Okay, you're here, fine, thank you. I'll stop being as mad at you, but, like, you're gonna have to give me a minute." That's how I treated him for a long time, so anyway.
So let me back up. So you were raised with you were raised in a religion, and it's always been Christianity of some designation.
Yeah, actually, yes. Yeah.
And when if you were to mm, describe the boundaries between the different faiths that you've experienced, would you say, from birth to how old did you engage with that sort of parentally chosen form of God?
From the beginning, it was always in a charismatic evangelical Christian church.
Mm.
And after that, 97 thing, the 1997 thing, I went to all different kinds of churches.
Okay.
I just wanted to be in every church I could be in. Um, and so I adore all kinds of services. I remember feeling the presence of God in a Catholic mass. I was just like, it was very liturgical and routine, and it seemed void, like, but at the same time I was experiencing him there. So I don't know. I love church services of all different kinds.
Just a
So
different type of conduit, it feels like maybe.
yeah, yeah.
So
But yes, so my mother's church was the Assemblies of God church, which was very interesting. And then the church I came into, for a short period while I was pregnant with Tiffany was a, non-denominational Christian, charismatic leaning faith, and then that was, very short-lived. And then, after 97, I went back into the Assemblies of God church, and that wasn't because I was, like, seeking that one out. It's just the people I worked with. This was very interesting because I probably would not have chosen that community. But the people I worked with had come into a relationship with God about maybe 2 years before this. And I noticed they stopped doing drugs, and I noticed she stopped cussing, and I noticed she stopped, like, a lot less coping skills were being piled on, And so I was like, "Well, whatever." So when I had that moment at that battered women's shelter and I could finally make a phone call, I had to wait 3 days. It's a story. I called her because I was like, know you've been going to church, so can you pick me up on Sunday?" And that's how that happened.
And so she took you.
Yeah, she did. She came and got me from the police department and took me that day, and then the next week, I asked him into my heart again and just have never really looked back, even though it's been a wild ride. It's been a wild ride, and we'll talk about that because there's so many things that have happened. Now, my faith looks absolutely nothing like it did back then, even though the core of it is the same, like my connection to divinity, the Christ. Um, I'm having a really hard time with the word Christian right now, just because of where for the timestamp on the podcast, currently, Christian nationalism is uh, changing the fabric of our society. And it's not necessarily fabric that I'm wishing were being woven in. That's all, like in that name. So now my faith looks a whole lot different now than it did back then. But
So describe to me the God of your childhood. Like you're 7, you chose to be baptized on your own. Talk to me about what that
yeah,
God looked like to you as a child.
that God, I don't know, I don't remember anything about the community we moved in, like what it was, but it was a smaller church. I can remember that. I remember my sisters and I standing and singing in front of the congregation. I remember feeling very supported. My mom always had um everything. So that God seemed to be a God, or the God that church served seemed to be a God who liked to help meet people's needs, who liked to be present. Um, and I got to see little miracles all the time. And like he would, in a weird way, I felt like I would know that a miracle was about to happen before it did. And so I was like, well, why would you tell me that? And I just had these little thoughts in my head, but I never articulated them until now. I was a little tiny kid, and I don't know. I just remember loving, I think his name was Skip. If that was his name, there was a pastor named Skip. I'm pretty sure the name was Skip. And I loved him so much. And I was like, if God looks like this man at all, I want everything to do with him.
So kind of benevolent, kind, magical, attentive, and present.
Yeah. And then what's bizarre is I can remember the visual of Skip. He had a physique that reminded me of my grandfather, who was everything but that. Do you know? So it was really always just, I've always had weird daddy issues with God. There's no doubt about it. Like I have a real hard time with God the Father just because of my dad, my daddy issues and my mom's daddy issues. And there's a lot. So yeah, go on. Sorry.
So my understanding is that your major falling out with God was for almost a decade spanning 1989 to about 1997. Does that sound right?
Yeah,
Okay. And what happened
that's
during
exactly it.
during there's a term called the cat years when you're raising kids, and it's they're dogs when they're little, and they come when you call them and they want to be around you and they're delightful and they listen to you, and then you hit the cat years, and then they don't do any of that anymore, and then they go back to being dogs again once they grow up a little bit out of the teenage years. So when you were in the cat years with God.
That's so perfect, Jenny. I mean, to have that frame of reference for how I could refer to it is such a gift. Gosh, I love this.
So
Anyway,
you had your cat years. How did you experience knowing that there was a God and not liking him very much? How do you live with that?
that was very interesting. And my second husband had been born and raised in an even more legalistic, like Church of God, and he had fallen away too. And so we both had this like crazy high moral compass, but we were both like uh mad at him. And so there were some interesting conversations during those years. And then that same man tried to use scripture like to support an argument one time. I'm like, dude, get out. Like, no, I don't know. It was just really complicated. Um, And then when he found out that I was a Christian 10 years later, because that's what happened, I wasn't divorced from this man. He was like, "Oh, well, biblically, you can't divorce me or whatever." I was like, "No." So it was very, very, very complicated in my head and in my heart during those years because I don't know. I feel like it's trying to ignore a roommate in a house. It's like, how can you ignore a roommate? Like moving in the same spaces and just pretend like they're not there at all. So I think it was where my anxiety kicked in, probably.
That makes a lot of sense.
uh,
So then, I would love to hear more detail about how you found your community and really felt connected at the church where you met your now current husband.
yeah.
I would like spill the tea, my friend.
Spill the tea. So it was about 3 a.m. I'm in a battered women's shelter and I basically told God he had to prove he was real, and he did. And then I called my friend and asked her to take me to the church she was going to because the fruit of her life seemed like where I wanted to be. And that was all I needed. It was just, I was immediately received with love. And part of the reason was this is fascinating. I've never really realized this. I was in the dental field for 14 years. So many of my patients went to the same church because the doctor I work for years had gotten saved and he started just bringing these patients in. Little by little, I started performing their prophies and doing all the things and talking with them. And so I hadn't ever realized that that was happening behind the scenes, right? I'm just seeing Jill and Patrick do their thing, getting to know all these patients, loving all these patients, um, and then I walk into a church, and one of the first people I see is one of my favorite patients. And he starts sobbing that I'm in there. And I'm like, why are you crying? And he's like, Barbie. And I was just like, whoa. Anyway, so I jumped out of the frying pan of domestic violence and abuse into the fire of a high control group that provided a lot of support and a lot of structure and a lot of felt safety at the time. It was a perceived safety, right?
That makes
Like a
sense.
perceived social structure. And I'm like wildly in love with Jesus the whole time. So there was a lot of room for influence in my boundary skills and lack thereof. That's where this messy soup of patriarchy and just all the different things that man has done to the Bible and scripture and religion with this heart that's like on fire and just would do absolutely anything he asked me to ever. Do you know what I mean? So it's like it was really a complicated place, so I gave up a lot of boundaries. And there's a saying in the church, I don't know if you're familiar with this, but that it's 20% of the people do 80% of the work. Like for anything you see happening at a church, it's 20% of the people. I probably accounted for like 2/3 of that team. Do you know what like, I
Wow.
just always made up in droves, like, I was there every day, I was on the worship team, I was running the coffee house, I was literally, if the doors were open, I was there, which is a tender topic for my children.
Which is an unsurprising role given what I know of you, because you're an unstoppable force of nature, and so wherever you put your heart, it obviously,
Yeah.
is the entire thing all at once, all the time. I can also see a situation where in a place that is so what feels like unconditionally loving, but it actually seems as though there are a lot of hidden strings and maybe more conditions than are initially perceived. It's unconditional provided you follow these rules very explicitly and don't step out of line.
Yes. Yes, and then you add the other kind of weird component that in the Assemblies of God church, a man cannot be a pastor if he's married to a divorced woman. So I walk in, divorced woman, twice, with a brain that loves like theology and could like I could probably write sermon after well, you know me. You know me, Jeni. I have no trouble coming up with things that I'm passionate about, right? But and I have this big less than banner over me. No man who wants to ever ascend to pastor of any kind, youth pastor, worship pastor, which is what Stephen and Stephen's parents probably would love for him to have done. And that's where we met on the worship team. So if he was ever going to ascend to the highest of that level, he couldn't be with me in the Assemblies of God church. We could not stay in that same
Was
church.
the same true was the same true for the women of the church?
We women pastors, yeah, you could not be a pastor if you were married to a divorced partner.
Gotcha.
Why yeah, divorced partner. The only formerly married person an Assemblies of God pastor can be married to is someone who was a widow or a widower. And so I am immediately disqualified from like in my mind, all the men in the church, because I'm like, almost any of these men, if they really want a heart after God, could want to like ascend to this eventually. Do you know what I mean? If like, I don't know, it was just weird. It was a weird combination. I'll probably edit a bunch of this out, but yeah, it was fascinating. I don't know.
So, how much do you want to get into about what happened with Stephen?
I think well, it's so important, right? I took a couple of notes so that I would honor both of us if possible, because that was tricky.
Well, and we also don't have to do this either. We
No,
can.
no, I want to because
Okay.
I absolutely want to. There's so many people who know about this part of me. Oh man, maybe I don't have it. That's all right though. Okay. Now, 2001 or so, Stephen and I are serving on a production team together, and we just strike up a friendship. We have very similar likes and personalities, and he's 19 at the time. And I don't know, we're 14 years apart. So, we start, we're hanging lights together in the auditorium and doing all the production team stuff. And we become best friends, like inseparable best friends, because he's so much younger than me. He's so safe. And everything was going great. Everybody supported us. And then I had a really tricky season, personally. And I realized, how much mm, the word that wants to come up is virtue, but it's not the right one. I was the one, kind of keeping us on this more pure path, you know? It was just and
You
then
were your own chaperone.
yeah, I was my own chaperone, that's so good. We were really good, and then something happened personally, and my whole world fell apart, and, grief does crazy things to you, and I wanted no chaperone. And we we began to unchaperone ourselves, and we began to be as two consenting adults, sexually intimate. And 2005, actually this week, 2005, so 20 years ago, this is so cathartic for me. The leadership of the church found out about it. It was tricky because there were some complications in who's who and who what was what, and basically we were guilty of the same crime, but given different consequences of for the crime.
And what exactly is
Sex outside of marriage.
Oh, sorry, that one. Okay.
Yeah, yeah, that one. Sex outside of marriage. And then for me, they kicked me out because they said I was being argumentative. And so that's that. It was really tricky. I lost my entire church community. I lost my employer, who was on the board of the church at the time. So many of us have already reconciled, and there's literally no hard feelings here. This is just that the cascade of events went. Church leadership found out. We were put in a process. I questioned certain processes. I got kicked out.
What does it mean to get kicked out of a church?
I
Mhm.
literally got a letter that said, You can't come here anymore." And
Okay.
in the same letter, it was so specific. I still have it actually. Um, this board member let me know that I couldn't even drop my kids off at the youth group or pick them up.
Wow. So you lost all of the support, all of your friends, a major structural support for your own sense of God, and potentially the man you were seeing.
Yeah, and my employer was also my landlord. So I lost my job, I lost my health insurance. This was a year that I had a really major event happen with my 14-year-old. And I lost my health insurance, my job, my house, and all of my friends
Wow.
between November and June.
And how did your relationship with God, how did you maintain that? I know we're going to get to the social component of this too, because there's a lot of like fallout in your not unholy life, but the day-to-day quotidian part of your life. But what how did you handle sort of, it must have felt like a betrayal from God too in some way to have this
I
implosion.
think no, I think I always knew that that was the fear and the hate of man.
Mm,
I think I always knew that
okay, that makes sense.
because there's only one thing I know absolutely about my God is that he's love. He is the God of love. And so anytime anybody acts outside of love, they're not actually representing God anymore. They are now representing their own ego.
So then we have the fallout. Stephen was asked to stay and you were told to leave.
Yeah. So I found a house and Carrick and I, my son and I, moved into this little house in this really cute little neighborhood. Turned out to be literally around the block from Stephen. Stephen lived with this group of bachelors. They called it the bachelor pad. And yeah. And so what was really interesting, I guess I shouldn't say I lost all of my friends because I'm going to give a shout out to Ryan Ryder. Ryan Ryder represents Jesus better than anybody I know. He was the one of the bachelors in the bachelor pad, and he is just one of those people that exudes love and acceptance. And so he was always saying hi, when he would pass by. And so we started having brunch on Saturday mornings together, and they had a Bible study that was going on. And I don't know, we just still moved in the same circle. So my God was a whole lot different than Stephen's God at that point. We weren't serving the same person. I was back in the I would probably say the most authentic relationship, more childlike. It was that you're on your own. Like everything had to be stripped away. Every mask that I thought he wore or box I had put him in, and really I always did attribute it to other people. And I think that, I don't know, this is hard. This is really good. I love this.
I am curious, if we're going to stick with religion in general, how that experience has shaped what you perceive to be your God now. Because we've touched on it briefly, but for the for the atheist,
Yeah.
can you explain to me what your God means to you or is?
Yeah.
An
It
easy
yeah.
question.
Yeah, yeah, no, 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 it's good, this is good. Like, it's changed so much over the year because, like, as a kid, he was almost like a cosmic parent, um, someone I always, like, wanted to please, or he kept score, all of that, and I'm just letting go of those images, and now I think of him more as the source of love or, like, the ground of being, like, the presence that I sense in the moments of, like, deep connection or beauty or grief. I I picture God as like the silence between the notes, I don't know, for me, he's just the holder of all of my experiences, the light and the dark. When the world feels harsh or unfair, it's like I keep bumping into love and meaning in places where I never expect them, and that's, I don't know how to describe it. It's just, I've seen healing happen in the midst of heartbreak, and I've felt peace when it doesn't make any sense. And never makes any sense on paper. I found that, like, if I live as though love is the deepest reality there is, I'm tapping into God.
Beautiful. I think we should pause and think about that one for just 1 second. If love is the deepest reality there is, that's how I tap into God. That's
Yeah.
beautiful.
Yeah. Because if you could encompass everything love means, that's God. And so that means you have to incorporate every aspect of humanity. And yeah, so I really do. I believe God is love. That's just the one thing I believe is that God is love. And so wherever love is, that's where God is for me.
So, how do you reconcile that with your frustrations with God not healing your sister?
Yeah.
How do you negotiate that?
Yeah, this is good because so I have a few uh, metaphors for God I think that might help if I could give you the picture of a garden. Just imagine the secret garden, if you will. There were walls all around it. And inside the garden is every kind of expression of life. Okay, let's just imagine it's humanity. Let's just say this garden is now humans, right? Inside the garden, God controls everything, ultimately controls everything that comes in. But as you know, when you've seen things in nature or you've seen things organic, there's always anomalies. There's always this the propensity or the potential for the mutation or the adaptation. Every time I see anything organic happen, I see some strange isolated something. I could be growing carrots and one is purple. No idea why. It's just purple. And so by seeing that in nature, that's how I apply that kind of thing to this topic. Because then also in the garden, you have the detritivores who only survive on the decaying species of another, right? And so in every system, no matter what it is, you have to have some component for keeping the system stabilized. And that does mean illness. That does mean people purging society of whatever or what these stupid things. I just really do believe that if God wanted robots of love, what would the purpose be if we were all just robots of love, just boop, 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 just love, 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 never, ever, ever being tested, never being proven, never, ever having a chance to develop that to the nth degree, like to our highest self. I honestly believe that our whole purpose here is to try and experience love in the face of fear at all times. I really do believe that. And so I believe that hell is just fear. Living in fear, that's just the separation of God. It's just separation from love. And so I don't know. Did I answer?
Yeah, no, absolutely. My, I guess, addendum question then is that there have been lots of studies about the power of prayer. Um, it seems, and this is from an atheist, so take this with a grain, but it seems almost reprehensible that you could beg an all loving, all knowing, all powerful God for a favor in some way, and that if he is dispensing miracles, sometimes he will and sometimes he won't. And the idea that it might be predicated on how nicely you ask makes me physically ill.
Yeah. Wait,
So,
and
talk
me
to me
too.
about the power of prayer.
Straight up me too. That's so cool that I didn't know that one was coming. And I love it because this is off the cuff. I And this will tap in. So I have complicated thing with prayer. My mom. So I have my youngest sibling is 11 years younger than me. She was medically complicated at birth. She was issued her last rites as, a 4-pound baby, all of these things. Like my mom called from the hospital and said, send a bracelet in to Jim and Tammy or whoever they were, Baker or whatever, so they'll pray for us. And we did it. And as an adult, I thought, what the I would bleep. What was that? Like, what? And so I have been all over the map in prayer. And I think that this will probably go a little deeper than I want it, maybe a little longer, but this is the comedy and the beauty of the way God has been with me in regard to prayer. So, the very first thing I did as a new believer in 1997 was go to Panama on a missions trip. Okay. We land, we go to this tiny little village of Guaymi Indians, and they are the most beautiful people. And we have our first prayer night. And who comes up to me but a little handicapped girl who looked a whole lot like my sister Lori did, but with darker skin around the same age. And I was like, screw you, God. How could you? Like, why are you presenting me with her right now? Like, the one thing I hate you for is that you never, because, like, why me? Why did she walk up to me? Of all the other people on this team, why did that little girl walk up to me? I am literally standing at the altar having this actual conversation in my head with God. And like, immediately just going, I don't care. I'm just going to set this aside for a minute. And I'm just going to trust for her because, and I'm not going to pray for her healing. I'm going to pray for your will in her life. I'm going to pray for your peace over her. I'm going to pray for your blessings over her. I'm going to pray in any way that I can that takes my agenda off of it and allows his agenda to flow through it. So I feel like anybody who's like begging God, it's so hard. There's this is complicated because like there's scriptures that say, "Come and beg." Like there's a scripture that says like about the persistent widow that So God doesn't mind when we beg for things, but he always wants us to ask for things that are in alignment with his will for us and his greater good for people. So I don't ever like go up to God and like dispense a miracle for me. Typically, my prayers look more like, help me be okay no matter what the circumstance. If you want to heal me, so cool. If you don't, I'm still good with it.
And I think that that makes logical sense. I can reconcile that with your image of an all-loving God.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
Something we had talked about earlier about maybe getting into was the concept of a soul.
Oh, I love that one.
So first, do we believe in a soul?
It's uh I the soul for me is a complicated one. I haven't really nailed where I land. Um Soul in the Christian realm is used a couple of different ways. It's like your soulish, like your ego-ish, like your fleshly desires. And then there's like what the concept of a soul. I feel like if you can imagine the human body like a piano, like a working piano, there's every key, all the legs are there. I guess my belief about the soul and the conscious is that they're sort of one and that's the musician who sits at the piano.
That's beautiful. That is a phenomenal explanation.
Thank you.
Wow. So, how do you construct the idea of everyone having a soul if there are people whose fundamental personality has changed because of a traumatic brain injury? Now they are a
Yes.
different person. Or
Yes.
people who have had um, a split between the two halves of their brains, like when you have uh, a surgery in order to prevent dramatic seizures. And now they have
Yeah.
two actually different personalities that don't communicate well across the hemispheres. How do
Yeah.
you reconcile their soul location?
Yeah. Uh, I don't think it's confined to a spot. I think it's sort of woven into us as our whole being. And if you imagine the piano, a piano can be damaged in transit. There's a lot of reasons why a piano might not function like you want it to, or you have to do something to change it. This reminds me, we used to have a piano here. It was an antique piano, and it was a beast to keep tuned, like a beast, because uh, it was an original grand piano. They put it on its side, and so it was never really intended to be used in that way. Okay, so Stephen had to play around the weird spots in the strings. He had to either embrace all the dissonance and work that into his music intentionally. Anytime he sat down to that piano, he had to either work around the untuned spots, the broken keys, everything. And he still played it. And his music was still beautiful. It just was harder for him to play it. We either had to keep it tuned all the time, which was not easy, and then there were still the other things, like the piano keys. The ivory kept popping up. It didn't keep him from playing the piano, though. Do you know what I
Yeah,
mean?
I do.
So, I hope that helps.
I think that's fantastic. I really like your analogies because although I am on the other side of this sort of philosophical divide, I
Yeah.
think your perception is like really magnificent. Like I think it's a really beautiful way to look at the world and I feel very honored that I get to have this experience with you to share it.
Oh my gosh, me too. When you told me about that car ride and how you wanted to ask me stuff about this, I was like, "Yes!"
So, where would you say that you see your sort of spiritual growth? Like where are you still working it out? Like where on your daily, trajectory
Yeah.
towards knowing God better, experiencing more love, where would you say you're going with that?
Yeah. Oh, the one thing I think, that I am thankful to be I'm really thankful to be alive right now, where we have archaeological history to show us what has literally physically been done to the word of God. Um, we also have amazing breakthroughs in science and, different things about consciousness and the universe and how it's expanding. I just love the way science and technology are merging right now to help me have a better informed faith. I think that that's where I am. I feel much more informed. I really do believe now. This is interesting. I'm going to do a tiny segue. Back in the Assemblies of God Church, we used to take classes about how all of the other religions of the world were wrong. They literally gave us classes about, like, all of them. They would go over each religion, break down their tenets of faith, and describe why ours were the right way. But
Wow.
then I was treated in the way that I was treated, and a lot of reconciliation has been done, with some people, but there's still a lot of hurt under the surface of a lot that happened back then, and so I had to wrestle with that, "Mm, you're right, we're wrong," kinda thing, So now I've been untangling that now, so all of these years, and now I really do believe that. Well, you're familiar with the blind man and the elephant story. I
Mhm.
I
Yep.
am starting to believe that all of the world religions of all the world are just basically blind men at the same elephant. That's what I believe.
I love that. I think that's fantastic. And it's a really good way of allowing for the differences while also celebrating the commonalities.
Right. Yeah.
All right. So this is unboxing Barbie. What else do you want to share about faith and God in general?
Mm, I don't know.
As someone who's been on the outs of their community, on the inside of their community, switching communities, reestablishing faith within a different life context, as someone
Yeah.
who's suffered and someone who's celebrated, what would you say
Yeah.
to someone else?
That's good. I think for a long time I thought faith meant believing that God would protect me and the people I love from pain. But life has shown me a lot of otherwise, has shown me otherwise. And so I've lost people I love. I've seen the suffering that makes no sense. And I've had, moments where I've wondered if he was paying attention, but I don't see him as the one who's pulling strings and deciding who gets hurt and who gets healed. I see him as the one who sits with us in the ashes, who weeps with us, who somehow brings beauty out of brokenness, not by preventing suffering, but by being part of it. And so, um, the world is out of tune in so many ways, like that piano I was talking about with Steven. And there are notes that I wish I could skip in my own life. And I do believe that God is the musician who can take it, like the broken, dissonant parts. And if we can truly stay rooted in true love, like absolutely love and not fear, because you have to choose one or the other at all times, right? Always. That he can work in absolutely anything. And so I don't know. I have this saying where I'm like, God will do anything. God can do anything with anything. And I don't know. And he asks me to be the hands that'll help. So it's like just watch where we can be hands that help. I don't know.
I love that.
So I don't believe that God causes suffering. I do believe that God is always working to bring healing, even in the midst of the mess. And I still wrestle with it, but I'd rather have a faith that's honest about the pain in my life than one who presents like everything is fine. So I don't have the answer, but I do have hope that love is stronger than suffering and that God is somehow with us, even when the world feels unbearably dark. And I really appreciate you, Jeni. And I want you to know that I don't see our friendship as a project or a debate to win. I think you know this. I'm grateful that you trust me enough to have these conversations. And I'm so thankful for your questions about suffering because there are days when we all struggle with it and there's no neat answer for it. But I think when we're honest with each other and ask hard questions and show that we still care deeply, it's just there's sacred ground. So just thank you. Thank you for the way you asked those questions. Thank you for listening so deeply. And thank you for being a friend who is safe enough to have this kind of conversation with. I'm walking away from this feeling more grounded. Not in having all the answers, but in the beauty of the questions themselves. And to anyone who listened and held this space with us, thank you. My hope for this episode wasn't to convince anyone of anything. It was to model what it might look like, to lean into the uncomfortable and choose curiosity over certainty, and to build a bridge of understanding across a divide. And if there's one thing I know for sure, it's that faith, like love, isn't meant to be kept in a box. It's meant to be lived, questioned, and shared. Until next time, be kind to each other and lead with love and carry on, comrade. And Jeni, I love you so much. Thank you for your time.
This was such a delight.
Have the best day.